Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here this morning and coming for these consultations. As you know that it has already been announced that government will be issuing a mini budget on the 24th of March. Last year, excuse me, last year when we presented the budget, we had said that because of COVID and because of the changing circumstances, there is a possibility of a mini budget that could be developed because a lot of things have been changing, as you know, since COVID started. So this is the result of the announcement we made last year. And as you know, circumstances have changed. The borders have opened now. The borders were closed when we delivered the last budget. The borders opened on the 1st of December. And of course, a lot of people are now going back to jobs. The economy has started moving somewhat. And obviously, we want to make sure that it continues to move. So as a result of that, we need to make some adjustments because the revenue has slightly increased. There are certain expenditures that need to be realigned. And as a process, we are now going around Fiji as much as possible in this short period of time to hear from members of the public about what they think is important to them, what are the requirements they have vis-a-vis the budget. And before we open up the floor, please, when we open up the floor, don't hesitate to ask any questions. Don't think anything is too hard or too difficult to ask. And, don't think anything is too silly. But before we do that, there's a lot of misunderstanding about the economy. A lot of people don't understand. There's a lot of misinformation at the moment going around. As I've also said in Ba some time back, a lot of lasu-lasu, a lot of jhoot going around. So we have to make sure that we have the right facts before you actually, think about the economy, when you make decisions about the economy. So I just wanted to start off firstly, this presentation just about what happened. So this one is which one is the thing? The pointer? The red one? Yeah. So before COVID, what was the Fijian economy like before COVID, during COVID, and of course after COVID? One thing I have to say that I want to thank every single person that has got vaccinated. We are very glad you got vaccinated because as a result of you being vaccinated, Fiji is one of the most highly vaccinated countries in the world, in particular from a developing country. Your ability to get vaccinated, your willingness to get vaccinated has meant that we're able to open up the borders on the 1st of December. It's not just about us being safe, amongst ourselves, amongst our families, our community as a country, but how other people view us. If we had very low rates of vaccination, the tourists will be very hesitant to come to Fiji. Because they'll say it's not safe, very low rates of vaccination, so Fiji is not a safe destination. So that's why we are seeing tourists now returning. New Zealand now, of course, has allowed their citizens to travel, and a lot of Kiwis have started coming to Fiji also. So before COVID, we had this particular period here. This is when the economy was growing. You can see for 9 years the economy has grown. Every single year the economy has grown. Of course there are times when it slowed down, but it still grew. When we have cyclone has a huge impact, as you know, on the economic growth. And this is what we've been talking about, as our Prime Minister has been saying, we've been growing for the past 9 years. When the economy continues to grow, it means that we are getting more money in the economy, a lot more people are getting jobs. Because the economy grows, there's more demand for jobs. So we see a lot of employment taking place. Of course, then we had 2019, we had a negative growth rate, just before COVID struck us. The 9 years of growth, and please, at the end of it, we can go back to the slides if you have any questions. And, this is what I was talking about, the GDP. In terms of the growth of the GDP, this is where Fiji was, $0.1 billion, 2019 is 10.7 billion, this is the value of our GDP. In respect of how much money people had per capita, per individual, in terms of if you divided the amount of GDP you have against the population, that's the GDP per capita you get. So we grew quite substantially, people became richer. As you know that people have more cars on the roads, a lot more people are connected to electricity, a lot more people have access to water, a lot more people have better paying jobs now. So you can see the well-being of the country was increasing, and we're on a very good path. What are the areas that contributed to our economy? We as a government have been trying to what we call diversify our economy. We don't just want to be dependent on sugar and tourism. Because if you have a cyclone, for example, and then if all the sugar crop gets affected, if all your tourism gets affected, the hotels get blown away, then we have very little things to depend on in terms of economic growth. So what are the things that we've been doing? If you can see, manufacturing has been growing. Sorry, I keep on walking past this thing. Manufacturing has been growing. This is the contribution of manufacturing, wholesale, retail, agriculture, fishing and forestry, financial insurance activities. I'll come back to this also. Some new areas actually growing now in Fiji. For example, like what we call the BPO sector. A lot of people are coming to Fiji to set up businesses in respect of what we call call centers. So like an Australian bank or insurance company will hire Fijians who will sit here in Fiji and answer phone calls for an Australian who's calling their bank in Sydney. You'll have a Fijian answering the phone calls. We had 3,000 new jobs created in the BPO sector in the past 2 years, even during pandemic. Because a lot of their businesses, that type of call centers, BPO, was in Philippines and India, but they now prefer to bring those businesses closer to their home, which is Fiji. So again, I mean, the growth, the reason why we had a lot of growth was because, you know, the Constitution provided everybody's rights. We had a lot of innovation in economic and social policies. I mean, these things here, many of you know, a few years ago, very few people had this. Mobile phones. In 2007, 2008, 2009, under the Beni Marama government, we went and negotiated. We liberalized the telecom sector. We had Digicel coming in. And of course, the phone call before, if you used to make a phone call at a peak hour, it used to cost you 99 cents a unit. Today at peak hour, it costs 22, 23 cents a unit. You have 5 up, 7 up, nearly everybody has a mobile phone. So these are the kind of things that we brought about in terms of using technology and making sure that we have access to telecommunications. There's a lot of private sector growth, a lot of private companies started building factories, etc. In Fiji. Our tax rates came out. As you know, before, if you earn more than $8,400, you paid tax. Then it went to $8,600, $16,000. Today, you don't pay any tax if you earn less than $30,000. No tax. Before it was $8,400. Some of you are old enough to know that. The company tax was reduced to 20%. And of course, we've invested a lot in what we call infrastructure. More people are getting connected to water, electricity, roads, doing subdivisions, quarter settlements. We're trying to get people to have long-term leases, Lautoka land development, all of the funding we provide, all of that is being done. So what happened when COVID came along? Now, it says it had a very bad impact, devastating impact on the Fijian economy. Our borders shut down immediately overnight. It's not just in Fiji, nobody knew globally, nobody knew overseas that the economy would actually shut down. All the economies in the world was affected. A lot of people got unemployed. In our case, we had over 100,000 Fijians, they actually lost their jobs overnight. And you know that. It's not only about people who work in the hotel sector. So it's not only about the hotel worker, the waiter at the hotel, or the waitress at the hotel, or the lady who cleans the bedrooms, or the guy who's the chef, or the taxi driver. It's also about people who live off those hotel workers. So, you know, before COVID, if you went to AFL Nandi Airport, just before you enter Nandi Airport, on the right-hand side, there used to be people who used to sell boiled evi. People who sold, you know, lovo packs, roti parcel, mithai, whatever it is. Those people got their money, they were living from the people who worked at the hotel. He said at the airport. When they came out at lunchtime, they bought that. And if the airport shut down, they don't have income too. It's the effects of that. You see a lot of people around Fiji Airways, all of that, people used to go and sell things. The guy who sells the boo to the tourists, he now has got no income. So it had a multiplier effect. And so we have to be able to understand that. So as a result of the border shutting down, overnight our economy just shrunk. Government lost 50% of its revenues because we collect money from the tourists when they come, they pay the STT, they pay VAT, they spend money, government gets revenue from that. So because the border shut down, because there's less transactions taking place, businesses were doing less business, and obviously it meant it had a huge impact on the economy. So you can see over here, I've just sort of summed it up for you. The tourism industry also brought a lot of money for us, foreign money for us, about $2 billion. Over 100,000 Fijians lost their jobs, tax revenue came down, and of course, we as a government decided that even though our revenue has come down, there are certain things that we must continue for you, for the ordinary citizens. So we did not stop free education. Free education continued. We did not stop social welfare payment. All those things continued. The civil service continued to get the same pay. There was no civil service pay cuts. And of course, what we did on top of that, those of you who are market vendors, we said we'll pay your market fees for 1 year. People who are fishermen will pay your fees for 1 year. So it's not like we tell Lautoka Municipal Council, don't collect fees. We actually have to give them money. So government in the budget has to allocate money. They say we have this many market vendors. This is how much they pay, $300-400 a year. The total cost is this much. We have to give them that money. Because if they don't get the money, how will they clean the town? They don't have a revenue. So fishermen, taxi permit holders who had to go and renew their licenses, etc., we paid for them. So those things were very important for us because we needed to maintain a particular lifestyle. We also then paid unemployment benefits, which we'll show you. So before we do that, you can see the economy, as I was showing you, it was growing, and then it went into negative growth, minus 0.4, went down by minus 15.2%. That's how much negative growth we've had, and 4.1%. This is not something peculiar to Fiji. It's happening throughout the world. All the different countries are experiencing this because of the fact that the global economy has shrunk. We are projecting now with the borders opening up that we'll have a growth rate of about 11.3, 8.5, 7.7, because obviously we're starting from a lower base. You can see the vista arrivals. In 2010, we had 632,000 visitors in Fiji. It was going up, as you can see. 2019, we reached 894,000 visitors. And we are hoping, if COVID had not struck, by now we would have had over 1 million visitors to Fiji. Just for information, about 51% of these tourists come from Australia. About 16-17% comes from New Zealand, and the balance comes, and about 15% from North America, and then the rest is China, India, and various other places. So you can see how it declined substantially. Some of you who are at the market, you would know that you have cruise liners. They sometimes come. Of course, all the cruise liners stopped, and you know that many of the initial COVID infection rate was spread very quickly on cruise liners in some parts of the world. So that's why obviously that stopped. And it went down again in 2021, and now of course we're hoping we'll get about 447,000 tourist visitors in 2022. So what did we do? As I mentioned to you, we decided to support a particular lifestyle. So we paid out $430 million in unemployment benefit. Those people who had FNPF, we said you could access your general account. If your money finished in the FNPF general account, government paid $225 a fortnight to anybody that was entitled to that. We paid about $185 million to FNPF through that particular scheme. Then of course we had the $50, we had the $90, and the famous $360. Right? 2 rounds of $360. So I'll show you how much money we actually paid through that. And of course we've done other things. Like for example, you can now go to a private doctor. If you go and see a private doctor, you used to go to the hospital before. There are certain private doctors you go to, we pay the fees for you. You don't have to pay any fees. I'm not saying that if you're about to have a heart attack or surgery, you go to the hospital, but you know, you've got a headache, you've got the flu, you've got a small cut, you can go and see the private doctor. In Lautoka, unfortunately, we have only one doctor that provides the service because we call for doctors to participate in it. So some doctors became very greedy, they started quoting very high prices, we said no. There's about 4 doctors in Ba. There's 2 or 3 in Nandi, some in Suva Nosori corridor. You would have seen in the papers on Saturday, we advertised again. So hopefully there'll be more doctors in, private doctors in Lautoka, they'll participate in this. So you go and visit them, you don't pay the fees, we pay the fees on your behalf. We've already paid $1 million for that. The reason why we did that, obviously, was when we had COVID, we had a lot of people wanting to go to the hospital. Infection rate was very high. You may go there because you've got a very minor ailment, you may have a small cut, or you've got a headache. He may go with a serious problem. And you have lots of people, so you can spread the infection. So we said, let's separate people who had minor ailments that could be dealt with by the private doctor, let them go there. So now the scheme is working quite well, so we want to, enlarge it. And a lot of people, I think, will feel a lot more better if they get off the bus over here, they come to town, go and see a doctor here, rather than go all the way up to the hospital. So that's what we've done, and hopefully more doctors will apply in that space. So this is what we are saying that we paid out. You can see through FNPF, we paid $205 million that we paid through FNPF. Now, these group of people here, the $90, $50, the 2 rounds of $50, and the 2 rounds of $360, was also initially, this one here, the 90, 50, and 50, was to help those people in the informal sector. Because those people who are with FNPF, obviously they have a FNPF number. There are a lot of people in Fiji who earn a living, but they don't have FNPF. The guy who sells the boo, the guy who sells vegetables, a lot of market vendors don't have FNPF. Ever since they become adults, they've been selling stuff at the vegetable. They don't have an FNPF account. So we said, how do we help these people? That's why we did the $50, the $90. We said $90 per household. Then of course we know a lot of people do a lot of chorwing that goes on. One household, we said $90, but sometimes 5 people from the same household applied. So we said, okay, we'll do $50 per person. So even if it's one household, you may have 4 people, they'll all get $50 each. So we did that. And then of course the 360 came along, and we applied that for people in the informal sector and also the formal sector. Those who used to get the FNPF. So as you can see, in 1 week, with the first round of 360, we paid $106 million in 1 week. We could have paid this amount in 1 day. But we knew what would happen. If we paid it 1 day, everybody would go and queue up outside Vodafone and Digicel. So we paid it over a few days. Now, when that money goes into the economy, $106 million in 1 week, that amount of money is pumped in there. So people go, some people may buy beer with it. We know some people did. That's okay. Some people maybe bought beer out of the 360, they spent $40 on beer. The others, they may have paid their rent, paid the electricity, bought shoes, bought clothes. Some lady may have bought some stuff for the small canteen or making handicraft. So that's why we paid that. So we wanted people to be responsible. We know that some people would have been irresponsible, but we know overall, majority of the people who got the money were responsible with it. So all in all, under this scheme, we paid $430 million. And now, the way that we disburse the money through the phone, you apply through the phone, you got your money paid through the phone. A lot of the countries in the world are now looking at Fiji as a way how they can adopt that also, because it was what we call digital payments. So I don't want to complicate it, but this basically gives how much money we spend, the blue line, how much money we make, and whether you get a profit or you get a loss. All governments in the world basically run at a loss. They have to. Because there are certain services, if we were to run everything at a profit, then we have to charge you for everything. Like at the moment you go and get your birth certificate, it's free. At one stage it used to be $2. That $2 did not even cover the cost of the paper and the ink. Forget the labor cost. So there are certain services that government has to provide where they don't make a profit. Because you don't want to pay the market rate, because if you had to pay us the right price for the birth certificate, the paper, the ink, the labor cost, the cost of the computer, we may be charging you $30 or $40. So governments have to provide certain services that is not going to be profit making. In the same way, I mean, if I go to New Zealand now and I go to a hospital, for me to park my car, I have to pay parking fees. Imagine if you try to do that in Lautoka. It will be a big problem. So a lot of the medical services you access, you're not paying the true cost. The true cost is much higher. The government obviously has to bear that cost. That's what we mean by deficit. So governments always fund those deficits. So this is, a lot of people are now talking about debt, karja, dinau, all of that, without really understanding what are we doing. Because when we provide certain services, obviously we make money too. Government makes money from VAT, from corporate tax, personal tax, fines, you know, LTA, police, etc. That's what you call government revenue. Then you have government expenditure. So there are a lot of people, for example, I was up in Nandronga, Novosa just yesterday. No, day before yesterday, on Sunday, I was there. And they said, can you connect us to electricity? We now have a hospital in Kayasi. Nobody ever dreamt that we have a hospital up in Kayasi. It's got an operating theater, you've got machines, all of that, up right in Kayasi. That obviously costs money. That's what you call capital expenditure. In the same way that you borrow money to build one house or build an extension to the house, you go to the bank, you want to borrow money to build one more bedroom to the house. That's a capital expenditure. If you go and borrow money to go and eat at McDonald's, that's what you call an operating expenditure. You borrow money to operate, you got nothing to show for it, but the debt will still be there. But if you borrow money to build, the debt will be there, the building will be there. After a while, the debt will go away, but the building will stay. Right? It's very simple terms. So if government is borrowing money to build things, to connect people to electricity, to water, build hospitals, schools, then of course it's a good spend. In the same way, we build a 4-lane road from Nandi to Matintar. I heard one politician say the other day, oh, it's a fancy road. It's not a fancy road. It's a road that's required. It's 4-lane road. One thing I don't know how many have noticed or haven't noticed. If you look there, there's nothing overhead. There's no electricity cables overhead. We put everything underground. Because Fiji is very prone to climate change. Some of you here are old enough to know that before we used to get a cyclone maybe once every 5 years, 10 years. Now we get 3 cyclones in a year. We get, rainy weather, very bad rainfall, excessive rainfall. So we have to be able to ensure that the infrastructure that we build is strong enough to be able to cater for that. If we build a 4-lane road today, it will cost far less today than if you were to build it 10 years' time. Remember that. So our debt, of course, as you can see, we had COVID here, we had to go out and borrow more money because government revenue came down. So that's the value of as a percent of GDP. We can see we're very steady. 2015, 2016, 44.6%, 43.5, 45.8, 48.4. We of course had the cyclone. We spent $500 million in rebuilding from Cyclone Winston. Nearly all the schools in Fiji are not owned by government. They're owned by faith-based organizations. They are owned by communities, but we still go and build the schools. Government has only about 10 or 12 schools under its name, but all the other schools are community-based schools. So just to very quickly tell you, the debt to GDP ratio, you can see over here how the debt to GDP ratio is falling so quickly because our economy is growing. And then over here, of course, in post-COVID, the debt to GDP ratio is increased for 2 reasons. Because our economy has grown smaller because of COVID, and also, of course, our revenue has grown smaller too. So we have to go out and borrow more money. Tourism. So let's compare ourselves to other tourism countries. What are they going through? Suriname, the debt to GDP ratio now is 140.6%. Maldives, again, a very tourist-driven country. It's in the Indian Ocean. just below, next to Sri Lanka, 137.2%. Bahamas in the Caribbean, again another tourism country, 102.5%. Mauritius, again tourism country, 101%. St. Vincent, again is in the Caribbean, 101%. St. Lucia, again in the Caribbean. These are all tourism countries. Seychelles, and Fiji sitting here at 80%. So in fact, we are the lowest in terms of debt to GDP ratio. In other words, we're doing well compared to them. But my point being is that all tourism countries have been affected really badly because the economy has been affected quite dramatically because of the closure of the borders. Again, if you compare ourselves to other countries, this line here shows what it was like before COVID and after COVID. You can see all these countries here, their debt has grown significantly after COVID. Even a country like New Zealand, the debt has almost doubled as a percent of, in terms of debt to GDP ratio. When it was 28, went to 52. Australia 42, went up to 62. Malaysia 56 to 71. Fiji sitting here, 46 to 80. You can see all these other countries, how their debt to GDP ratio has grown. United Kingdom, 86, 109. United States, 107 to 133. So, as we said, because of COVID, our debt levels have increased significantly as a result of our GDP becoming smaller also. So of course, once the economy opens up, then our debt to GDP ratio will come down significantly. Our debt to GDP ratio was declining quite significantly. We were on a downward trend. In other words, the debt as a percent of GDP was coming down before the pandemic, but of course it's now gone higher. And I've been through this with you. Now, one of the things we do is that when we have been borrowing money, there are two ways you can borrow money. One is you borrow money from overseas, and one is you borrow money from Fiji. Banks, FNPF, various other organizations. Why do they lend us money? It's because they make money from us, because they charge interest rates. We have always tried to keep at least 25 to 30% of our borrowings from overseas. No more than that. And mainly from locally, we borrow locally. But because of COVID, we changed it. Because if we borrowed money from overseas, there's more foreign money coming in. So we have what we call foreign exchange. Joe, can I just go through here? Because of, you see, nearly everything that we have in Fiji, that you eat, that you drink, that you wear. This gentleman here has a watch. He's got this bag. He's got this T-shirt. He's got these slippers. Everything here comes from overseas. You all eat purini, bambakau, panikeke, roti, cake, bread. What is it made out of? Flour. What is flour made out of? Wheat. We don't grow wheat in Fiji. Only two companies in Fiji make flour. Punja & Sons here in Lautoka and FMF in Suva. Where do they buy their wheat from? Australia. We've price controlled it through FCCC. So when Punja & Sons buys the flour, they said, okay, for example, we bought it at $300 a ton. We've now, this is our shipping cost. We've now they grind the wheat, they put something in it, other things, and they get flour. Then before they sell it to the supermarket, they don't sell it to you directly, they sell it to the supermarket. They go to the Competition and Consumer Commission, and they say, look, we bought it at $300 a ton. This is my labor cost, my electricity cost, my other costs, administrative costs. Then FCCC may say, okay, you can make only this much margin. You can't sell any more than this. Then when it goes to the supermarket, then the supermarket has to make another submission. They'll say, I bought it at this much from Punja & Sons. This is my storage cost, my staff cost, my electricity cost, my rent cost, because I'm renting a building here from somebody and I've got my supermarket. They'll say, okay, you can make only this much. That's price control. But if tomorrow Australia puts up the price of wheat from $300 to $400, the price will go up. Even though it's price control, the price will go up. That's beyond our control. The only thing we can control is once it lands in Fiji. That's when we price control it. The same thing with fuel. We don't have, unfortunately, we don't have fuel in Fiji. We don't have oil. We have cooking oil, we import it, but not the other oil. All the fuel that's bought in Fiji is bought from Singapore. The three companies, they all buy it from Singapore, because the refineries are in Singapore. The price of fuel has now gone up to over US $100 a barrel. We have no control. We control it once it lands. We said you can't make any more than this. But once the input cost has gone high, we can't control it. So that's why we ask people to eat more dalo, cassava, Fijian rice, bele, bhaji, bhindi, because that you can control. Of course, you get a cyclone, the price will go up. The same way Yongona was $85 a kilo before Winston. After Winston, went up to $185. People still drank it at the same rate. So these things we have to understand that we have control over, we don't have control over. Now, the reason why I told you that scenario was that when we buy things, you see all these cars here, they come from Japan. You need to have enough foreign reserves to be able to buy it. You need US dollars, you need Japanese yen, you need Australian dollars. The fuel that they buy from Singapore is all bought in US dollars. So when the tourists used to come, they bring foreign exchange, foreign money. So when we had the tourists, they stopped coming to Fiji, we have to make sure that we still have enough foreign reserves to be able to pay for the things that we're importing from overseas, because we're still buying wheat, we're still buying cars, we're still buying watches, we're still buying cooking oil. The tea, we don't even have tea in Fiji. All of you drink tea every day. Tea comes from Sri Lanka. So you need to have foreign exchange. So this is why we borrowed more from overseas in the COVID time. And the reason why we did that, because if we didn't, then you had less money. Then you could say, oh, you don't have enough money to pay for imports. And the dollar would have had to be devalued. That's the last thing we want. We don't want to devalue the dollar. Because if you're buying a lot of things from overseas and your dollar gets devalued, then of course everything will cost a lot more money. So I just talked about this, the foreign reserves. You can see, this is how much foreign reserves we had, $1.5 billion. How many months of imports you can buy. Today we have about $3.1 billion of foreign reserves, which is a very healthy position to be in. We can buy for about 8.7 months. Again, there's a lot of money, there's what you call liquidity, a lot of money in the banks at the moment, because we borrow a lot more money from overseas, all the ANZ, Westpac, BSP, Baroda, Bread, and of course Home Finance. Now, this is a major issue for us, for the world now. Inflation. I'm sure many of you will complain to us and say the cost of things are going up. A lot of these things are beyond our control. You can see inflation. In other words, how much things were increasing by. Inflation was very low in these periods. Very low in these periods. Now inflation is going up. And this is because the world price of things are going up. The cost of freight is going up. A businessman told me the other day where he was paying $5,000 for a container, today he's paying $15,000 for that container, coming from different parts of the world. So when the price of the container goes up, if Nemia here is a businessman and the cost of the container is now gone from $5,000 to $15,000, if he's bringing biscuits from overseas, he'll increase the price of biscuits to pay for the increased cost of the container. That's how business works. In the same way, if tomorrow the cost of you buying your vegetables from somebody, if you're the person selling the market, they sell to you the bhindi for $1 a bundle, $1 a pile, and now they put it up to $2 a pile, you're not going to sell it for $2. You'll obviously sell it for $3 or $2.50. So that's what's actually happening globally. I mean, this is again the type of inflation that has the impact. This is what we call the import. See, imports over here, the cost of imported goods is going up significantly. In Fiji, when you have, this is the domestic inflation, things that are within our own control. When there's a cyclone, you'll see the price of beans go up, other root crops will go up. When the cyclone goes away, people start growing stuff, then the price comes down. And after Cyclone Winston, a bunch of bananas in Suva, used to cost $2 before Winston. After Winston, it was $7. A lot of banana trees fell down. A lot of people still want to eat bananas, so they put up the price. Okay, what are we going to do, road to recovery? So we've done a lot of things. I mean, I don't want to sort of, you can ask me any questions. We've done a lot of things. So, as you know, that when the word vaccine was mentioned in the, when COVID came around, as I said that when COVID came around, we did not know how long COVID would last. Nobody knew in the world. Is it going to be 1 month, 2 months, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? Is everyone going to catch it and die? These were all the unknown things. Nobody knew. But of course, as things progressed, then somebody mentioned the word vaccine. As soon as the word vaccine was mentioned, our Prime Minister, also Minister of Foreign Affairs, started talking to all our development, all our partners, the diplomatic relationships we have. We started talking to people like the World Bank and ADB to see what they can do. And today, Fiji is very lucky in the sense, because of the efforts led by the PM in the diplomatic circles and the assistance that we got from other organizations, we have managed to get almost all our vaccines free. None of you have paid any money for the vaccine. We as a government did not pay any money for the vaccine. The first major lot came from the Indians. They gave us about 100,000 vaccines. Then we had the Australians, then the New Zealanders. And now, of course, the Americans are giving it to us. And one of the reasons, of course, they gave us the vaccines is because they knew that we were managing it well. And as a result of that, of course, now over 90% of the people are vaccinated too. You no longer have to have a business license. Some of you used to have a business license before. No more business license. We reduced the duty on many things. Stamp duties is no more. STT is gone. Departure tax was reduced from $200 to $100. ECAL. You know, those of you used to go and watch movies before, you have to pay 10% on top of the ticket price. Now it's 5%. All those things were reduced just to make things easier for people. And of course, a lot of businesses that had debts, we got them to have deferment of their loans, work together with FNPF and the banks, and of course the FRCS, loan repayment holidays. We gave a $200 million loan that was announced. Some people have benefited from it. FDB, the other banks. If you get that loan, we pay the interest rate for you on your behalf for 2 years. And of course, you don't do any principal payments. You only do repayments after 3 years. So there's a lot of things we've done, and I don't want to go into too much detail because I want to open up the floor from you, and we can give you more, if you have any questions on this regarding taxation, etc., and what we've done. For example, we put a lot of tax incentives for people to invest in agriculture, in the BPO sector, ICT, as we talked about, expenditure support to fisheries, forestry, and agriculture. And of course, we are still continuing with the tails and toppers with a few variations. So, again, if you have any submissions, any ideas you want to make after this, after we even leave, you can send this to your, through email. You can send it here to this address, budgetconsultationeconomy.gov.fj. You want to hand deliver it, or you can post it. I suggest you do this or that, a lot quicker. Or you want to give any of your ideas now, please feel free to do so. So I'd like to open up the floor. I know some people have come here with some of their own personal problems. Some people want to discuss those personal issues. We won't be able to, I think sometimes some of them are quite personal matters. You don't want to stand up and tell everybody about it. We've got some staff over here, and we'll get them to sort of sit over there. And if you've got any personal issues, please highlight it to them. They'll take notes. Please give your correct name and your phone number details, because obviously not everything can be done today. I know a lot of places we've gone to, people have some domestic matters, some land matters, some tenant matters, or electricity, roads, etc. So please feel free to give that information, and we'll get back to you in the next few days or so and tell you what's happening. If there is certain things that cannot happen at all, then we'll tell you it cannot happen. A lot of places we've been to where two brothers are fighting each other, he's cut my pipe or he's cut my road access, that's a personal matter, we can't help you. That's something you need to sort out yourself. We can't intervene in that. That's what you call, it falls into the personal space. We've had people who've come to us and said, I've got a case before the courts, can you do something about it? I can't do that. The Chief Justice will tell me, who are you? You go away. The judiciary is different from us. They are independent. So if any matter is before the courts, if any matter is being investigated by the police, that's a matter you need to go through. But if you think that somebody is committing fraud or there's corruption, then you can tell us that. That we can deal with and try and help you. We also know there's some people have TLTB issues, land issues. Again, please, you can highlight that to the staff. They'll take down all the details. If you've got any documentation, please give it to them. But we'd also like to hear your views in respect of the budget also. As you know, as announced by the Minister for Employment a few weeks ago, we've started what we call a review of the minimum wage. Remember, under the Bainimarama government, we introduced the minimum wage. There was never a national minimum wage in Fiji. So we started off, a few years ago, the last review that was done was in 2018, when it went up to 268 an hour. Now, please remember, the minimum wage is what we call a national minimum wage is for people who are unskilled. There are other sectors of employment where the minimum wage is higher. So if you're a waiter, from memory, the minimum wage for a waiter is $3.45 an hour. The minimum wage for forklift driver is different. Boiler maker, a truck driver, bus driver, they have different minimum wage, which is a lot higher than 268. Electrician, plumbers, their minimum wage is a lot higher. So when we review the minimum wage, it will have an impact on their wages too. That will also go up. And of course, we had said in 2018, we'll review the minimum wage every 2 years. Look at what's happening globally, in Fiji, etc. But we could not do that during COVID. People had already lost their jobs. So we could not go and do a review of the wages. It would have been unrealistic. But now the borders opened up. That's why we're doing a review now. The way it works is that it's an independent professor who comes from Australia. He goes and meets all the unions, the employers, the employees, hears submissions, and then they recommend a minimum wage rate to us. And the government ultimately makes that decision. So please remember, minimum wage is for those people who are unskilled. So if tomorrow, I've got somebody who wants to come and cut grass at my house, I have to pay them the minimum wage. Or somebody's digging a hole or whatever it is, you dig a foundation. But if somebody's driving a bus, the minimum wage is a lot higher. It's different. A boiler maker, a waiter, etc. So that's currently being reviewed. And obviously government is keen for this review to take place because it has not been reviewed for 2 years. Plus now, as we mentioned earlier on, the price of things are also going up. So we have to ensure that people have enough wages to be able to, cater for their day-to-day living. But remember one thing, the minimum wage, those people who are in the informal sector, it does not affect you because you're working for yourself. So the guy who's selling the boo by the roadside, minimum wage does not affect him. The lady selling boiled ebi it does not affect her. So a lot of people forget that nearly 130,000 Fijians actually are engaged in the informal sector. They make their own living. So it does not affect them, but if you have a wage increase, your ability to sell stuff to people who could not perhaps afford things before, maybe instead of buying one packet of boiled ebi, they'll buy 2 packets now. So that's one of the, you have to understand that. Some businesses, of course, say, if you make the wages too high, I won't be able to, the cost of my labor will go up, so I can't export it. Those people won't buy it because the cost of my goods will go up. Because I'm making garments in Fiji and the Bangladeshis are paying far less wages, or whichever country, or Vietnam is paying far less, whatever country it is. So those things also have to be looked at because we don't want people to lose their jobs also. So it's a balancing act. So in the budget, we also will be looking at ways as to how we can do other things in the budget to ensure that the cost of things are maintained at a particular price, at a reasonable level to make it affordable. But please remember, as we've said, if you read all the articles, the price of things will continue to go up at least for the next 6 months to 1 year. Because as you know, there's a war in Ukraine. Russia is fighting a war in Ukraine. Now, that part of Europe, there's a lot of fuel and gas that comes from there. So if the supply of gas stops to Europe, there'll be less gas available in the world. So places like Qatar that has a lot of gas will certainly have more demand. So the gas price will go up globally. So the cooking gas price will go up. We have no control over that. But it's because of the war that can have an impact on us. Because of the cost of the containers, it has an impact on us. We can't control things outside the country, but we can try and control what's happening in the country. But also it's important for people to understand where we are and what we need to do at least for the 6 months to 1 year, and then of course things will plateau off. Hopefully the war won't expand everywhere else, but it'll just remain there. But from the freight perspective, 6 to 12 months time, you'll see the prices actually level off. And we'll open up the floor now. Naka, thank you very much.